Histamine overload really occurs when you have a high level of histamine in the body. Essentially, your body can't break histamine down properly, either because you're overproducing it or because you lack the necessary enzymes to break it down efficiently. It can get really confusing when you're eating all of these gut healthy foods, things like fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, bone broth, collagen, and you feel like you're bloating and your pain is really just getting worse. But this histamine overload issue can be massively, massively improved. And we've seen it happen over and over again. Estrogen and histamine kind of play this dance. They do this dance with each other. When estrogen rises, histamine rises. Hello, my dears. Today we're going to be diving into the gut and histamine connection. And I'm going to be breaking down how the gut can influence our histamine levels, histamine overload, histamine intolerance, histamine issues. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. I'm traveling right now. I'm in a hotel room because I'm traveling for some work stuff. So instead of canceling this and not being able to do it, I wanted to just do it anyway. So we're doing it a little messy. You guys should see my setup right now. It's comical. I have my phone on, like the ice bucket that they give you at the hotel. My phone's on an ice bucket, but we're doing it because it's really not about what it looks like. It's more about what we dive into, all of the good information. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So when I asked my community what they wanted to hear about the most, it was gut and histamine issues. Now, I've done some trainings on this before in the past, and just how much our gut function and our gut health can impact our histamine overload and histamine intolerance issues. But today we're going to be diving into that a little bit more. So I feel like histamine is kind of like all the rage right now. Everyone seems to be talking about it. I know some things were kind of going viral on social about histamine and then people with PMDD and using antihistamines. And there's a reason for all of this, right? So when we work with clients, we want to identify the underlying why, what's at the root of all of this, and what's the cause for all of these kind of unexplained symptoms that people tend to be having. So a lot of times when someone is struggling with histamine issues, they present with like a lot of different symptoms across the body and no one really knows what's going on, right? So they can feel like they're not really connected, but they are connected to one another. And at the root is oftentimes a histamine issue. So we can see a lot of people that have been called like quote unquote mystery cases tend to have histamine stuff going on. A lot of people with chronic unexplained symptoms tend to have histamine stuff going on. If you've got like constant bloating, painful periods, diarrhea after eating is pretty common, headaches, migraines, lots and lots of food sensitivities, this is a big sign that there's an underlying histamine issue present. And what we do is we want to dig deeper and understand what's actually causing that histamine issue, right? So to break it down for you, histamine is really a chemical that your immune system releases. So it's mainly known for its role in causing like allergy symptoms, but histamine regulates countless different bodily functions and plays a key role in your body's really like inflammatory response. Now, histamine overload. So a lot of people talk about histamine intolerance. I like to refer to it as more of like an overload picture because we're not really intolerant to histamine. The body is producing histamine naturally. We encounter histamines all the time. There's histamine in, our environment. There's histamine in a lot of different healthy foods. That can actually be a sign that, you've got a histamine issue going on. If you feel like you've altered your diet, you're eating healthier, but you're feeling a lot worse, that can sometimes indicate that there's a histamine issue going on. But we're not really intolerant to it, right? Like we encounter it, the body knows what to do with it. It's more of an overload picture. It's more of an overload issue, meaning you are producing more histamine than your body can efficiently break down. So histamine overload, like you think of it as like you've got this histamine bucket, similar to like a stress bucket, right? You can hold this amount of stress. You can hold life's many stressors that come our way, but then a big stressor comes in and it's like you just can't do it anymore. You kind of hit your breaking point. You can think of a histamine bucket similarly. So as if you've got a bucket and your body is, histamine's going into the bucket with a spout. And you're trying to clear it efficiently, but when we can't clear it efficiently, that bucket starts to overflow. And that's when we start to end up with like a lot of these histamine, what I call them, like histamine symptoms. If the bucket is too full, that's when we're going to present with like a lot of issues. It can be chronic bloating, diarrhea, migraines, a lot of painful periods, really like harsh luteal phases, or many women experience ovulation pain. So ovulation is kind of that midpoint in your cycle typically. And that's when estrogen's going to rise right before it declines. And with estrogen rising, histamine can also rise. So when we're working with clients, we're kind of looking for some of these things that are present. Do they have really painful periods? Do they also have pain around ovulation? And then, of course, are they presenting with many different digestive issues? It can really show up like every different body system. We can see kind of a response from histamine. But I like to reference it as more of that overload picture so you guys can better understand that. It's not that you're intolerant to histamine. It's more so your body can't it's either overproducing it or you can't clear it efficiently. So histamine overload really occurs when you have a high level of histamine in the body. Essentially, your body can't break histamine down properly, either because you're overproducing it or because you lack the necessary enzymes to break it down efficiently. So it's one or the other. It's usually both because it's all connected. So when we're looking at someone presenting with a lot of histamine issues, we're looking at, are they overproducing histamine to begin with? Do they have things influencing their histamine overload bucket in their environment? And also really, can they not efficiently clear histamine quickly enough? So some of the common signs of histamine overload are going to be like nasal congestion or postnasal drip, bloating, diarrhea, eczema, hives, flushing or itching, allergies when people have a lot of allergies, heart palpitations, anxiety, even panic attacks. So it can kind of influence like the heartbeat and the heart beating quicker, which can feel very scary and trigger that panic attack. We'll see reflux and heartburn, intolerance to fermented foods. If you feel like you're more sensitive to fermented foods, that's usually because there's a histamine issue at play. Abdominal cramping is pretty consistent with that too. And then also, like I mentioned previously, symptoms can worsen at ovulation. We'll also see women with like the quote unquote period flu, meaning like you feel like you're almost getting sick right before your cycle starts. That's pretty consistent with a histamine issue as well. You know, it can feel a little confusing, but we'll break down today why the gut is so influential when it comes to histamine issues and actually overcoming histamine issues. We've helped so many clients really overcome these histamine overload symptoms and start to be able to tolerate many different foods again, like fermented foods, pickled foods, aged cheeses, aged meats. I mean, foods that they couldn't eat for like a decade once we've gotten to the root cause of the issue. So many foods naturally contain histamine or trigger histamine to release in the body. And like I mentioned before, like your body can typically handle this, but it can get really confusing when you're eating all of these gut healthy foods, things like fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, bone broth, collagen, and you feel like your bloating and your pain is really just getting worse. But this histamine overload issue can be massively improved. And we've seen it happen over and over again. So it's really not about eliminating histamines out of your diet or following a low histamine diet forever and ever. That's going to drive you, it's pretty difficult. It's going to drive you a little mad. And it's really not dealing with the root of the issue being why can't your body like efficiently clear these histamines in the first place? So the gut is a major root cause driver of histamine issues, to no surprise, which is why we're talking about it today. Different gut imbalances are really like hidden root cause drivers of histamine overload issues that a lot of people miss. We go to add in antihistamines, we go to take something like Pepcid, we go to take something like Zyrtec without fully understanding that the gut can be playing a massive role in our ability and inability to actually efficiently clear histamine. So I'm going to be breaking down the different mechanisms through which the gut does impact our histamine levels. Okay, so the first major way through which the gut influences your histamine levels is going to be the fact that certain gut microbes actually produce histamine. And we'll see this in functional stool testing that we do run with essentially all of our clients. So when certain gut bacteria or microbes are overgrown, they are actually causing or contributing to more histamine being released in the body. So there are certain bacteria that are mast cell liberators. Your mast cells are producing histamine. There are certain bacteria that are histamine producers, and there are certain bacteria that are histamine liberators as well. So this could be something like Klebsiella. We'll also see candida or fungal overgrowth like candida. It stimulates the mast cells to actually release histamine. So, for example, if you're someone who's dealing with a lot of these different food reactions and sensitivities, and you've got a lot of chronic bloating, and you're dealing with like diarrhea after eating, especially healthy foods, or Some classic telltale signs are you drink a green smoothie and you feel really bad because things like avocado and spinach are really high in histamine. Does not mean these foods are bad for you, just means they're not what your body needs right now in this moment. They can be contributing to more of that histamine issue. So if you're someone that kind of resonates with that, this could be what's going on, right? But kind of an overarching view of this is imbalanced gut bacteria can contribute to too much histamine being produced, and then your body can't break it down quickly enough, which then leads to the headaches, the migraines, the bad period pain, the ovulation pain, and the chronic bloating. So the solve here is not necessarily to take out these foods that are higher in histamine and just move on, because you're not actually addressing that gut bacterial issue. What we have to do is we have to identify which bacteria are present that are actually overproducing histamine. And then we have to come in and we have to kind of clean up your gut microbiome so we can lower these levels of these histamine producing bacteria. So then your body is not dealing with producing too much to the point where you can't clear it quickly enough. That's when that bucket starts to overflow, right? So, for example, we had a client who worked with us, I want to say it was last year at this point. She couldn't eat any fermented food. So she couldn't eat like pickles. She couldn't eat like pickled olives or anything like that. She couldn't eat blue cheese. She couldn't eat any of these foods. They would cause like chronic bloating. She was always bloated after everything that she ate. Now, when we looked at her gut microbiome, she had levels of these histamine producing gut bacteria. Once we came in and we cleaned up these gut bacteria, she can now tolerate all of these foods without any pain, any abdominal cramping, or any significant bloating. And the way that actually happened, the root of that was by addressing her gut microbiome piece. So we came in and essentially rebalanced her gut bacteria to support healthy histamine levels. Then her body was like, oh, I know what to do. I can clear this efficiently. If you're taking something like DAO enzyme, which is like pretty popular when someone has histamine issues, or you're taking something like vitamin C or quercetin, all of these things can be really helpful. However, if you're just throwing in a DAO enzyme on top of a gut microbiome that is imbalanced, so you have really overgrown Klebsiella or Morganella or Pseudomonas, these are different gut bacteria that can cause some histamine issues. We're not getting to the root cause of the problem, right? So you'll be taking these things forever. You're adding in the enzyme to help break down histamine, but you're not addressing the reason why you can't break it down quickly enough in the first place. Does that make sense to you guys? So basically, dysbiosis in the gut, an imbalance in our gut bacteria, specifically an overgrowth of these more opportunistic gut bacteria, and things like SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, can actually increase that histamine load in the body. And in addition to that, things like candida or fungal overgrowth can also stimulate those mast cells to release histamine. So different gut bacteria are mast cell liberators and histamine releasers. So at the root of the issue here is a gut microbiome imbalance, which is why we see, with the work that we do here by addressing the gut, we see so many clients be able to reintroduce these foods and go about their lives eating these foods without significant bloating after we address that gut microbiome piece. So that's the first point that I wanted to make with you guys today. The gut microbiome plays a massive, massive role in your histamine levels and potentially contributes to having too much histamine in the gut at once, in the body at once. So hopefully that makes sense. So the second way in which, through which the gut microbiome or the gut really plays a massive role in our histamine levels is through the gut barrier. So we'll see gut barrier issues contribute to that histamine overload picture. Now, remember, if you've watched any of my other trainings or listened to my podcast, you know that any imbalances in the gut microbiome, whether that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, an overabundance of bacteria in the small intestine, or overgrown bacteria or dysbiosis in the large intestine, or fungal overgrowth. These are all kind of like core gut imbalances. Any of these things are going to wear away at that gut lining or that gut barrier. We have a gut lining that has a mucosal barrier and an epithelial barrier, so a cellular layer. Now, when we have imbalances of our gut microbes, it's going to cause irritation and breakdown of that gut barrier, which is then going to contribute to what people would refer to as like leaky gut or just increased intestinal permeability. Your gut barrier is semi-permeable in nature. This is how we absorb the nutrients from our food. Shout out to the gut. Your body is like incredibly designed. So the gut lining is semi-permeable, so we can absorb those nutrients. Tons of nutrients are absorbed in the small intestine, but when it becomes hyperpermeable, we have too much flowing through that intestinal lining. And And on the other side of that intestinal lining is the majority of our immune system. So we can kind of see when we understand that any issue with that gut lining is going to contribute to that constant activation of the immune system, which will then contribute to systemic inflammation. And this is why people say things like, what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut, because it's going to trigger that immune system that's then going to cause systemic inflammation. And we can see that as many different things like joint pain, migraines, and headaches. We can also see it as, of course, chronic digestive issues, things like bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, etc. Are you finally ready to get to the bottom of your chronic digestive issues? Whether it's bloating, constipation, diarrhea, food sensitivities, stomach pain, or even skin issues. I'd love to invite you to join me for my upcoming 3-phase Good Gut Formula Masterclass that I'll be teaching next Wednesday on August 27th. This class is totally free. In class, I'll be breaking down our step-by-step formula that we walk all of our clients through in order to actually repair their gut and their digestive function, transform their gut health, and help them overcome their chronic, never-ending digestive issues. We're also going to be walking through some client case studies, and I'll be breaking down important topics like leaky gut, IBS, food sensitivities, and I always do a live Q&A at the end of class too. So if you feel like you eat clean, you exercise, you take those healthy supplements like magnesium or probiotics, and you're still struggling with nonstop digestive issues, then this class was quite literally designed for you. I'd absolutely love to have you there and bring all of your questions, bring your notebook, and we're going to get you a lot of good education and good information for overcoming those chronic digestive issues. So I do hope to see you there. That's going to be next Wednesday, August 27th, and we've got 2 times available. I teach one at 12 p.m. EST, and I also teach another one at 6 p.m. EST. Yes, I teach it live both times. I do 2 classes in one day. You can go to go.hannahillward.com/HGSB-masterclass to save your spot in class, and seats are limited because we do tend to fill up. I'll make sure that we pop that link to sign up and save your spot in class in the show notes below this episode. Once again, you can go to go.hannahillward.com/HGSB-masterclass to save your spot in class. So come on, come hang with us, come say hi. I'd love to have you in this training. We usually go for like an hour to an hour and a half. It's pretty thorough. If you've learned anything from this podcast and listening to this podcast, you know I really like to dive in. It's nothing surface level over here. So you're going to learn a lot in class, and you'll have the opportunity to work with us after class if that's something that you're interested in as well. Your digestive issues are very real, and just because you've been told that everything looks quote unquote normal doesn't mean that everything is actually normal. If you feel like deep down something is wrong, you're probably right. It's just time for a different approach. It's time to explore a different way of looking at things, and we'd love to help you there. Can't wait to see you in next week's 3-phase Good Gut Formula Masterclass. So our gut barrier plays a massive role when it comes to our ability to actually break down histamine, like to clear histamine efficiently. So when you're taking something like a Zyrtec, what you're doing, you're taking antihistamine to help you break down these histamines, right? Now, your gut naturally produces an enzyme called DAO, or diamine oxidase, to break down histamine naturally, because once again, histamine is present in many different foods, including like loads of healthy foods, things like avocado, spinach, collagen, bone broth, right? Like these things are considered healthy foods that a lot of us are eating in our day-to-day. The body knows what to do with these foods. Now, when we have a deeper gut issue, it can't break the histamine down efficiently. So DAO, or that diamine oxidase enzyme, these are responsible for breaking down histamine in the gut. We have another enzyme that helps to clear histamine in the liver, but DAO helps us to break it down in the gut. Now, DAO is primarily produced in the gut, specifically by the cells lining the small intestine. We can see that any issue with overgrowth in the small intestine, damaging that gut barrier, would then cause issues breaking down histamine, right? Because DAO primarily being produced in the gut, specifically in these cells lining the small intestine. Any issue with the small intestinal lining, we're going to run into issues producing adequate DAO, which will then cause issues when it comes to breaking down histamine. So any bit of intestinal inflammation or gut infections that are contributing to that breakdown of the gut barrier is going to lead to decreased DAO enzymes to actually break down histamine. Does that make sense to you guys? Let me know if you have any questions on that. Essentially, we've got that gut microbiome piece. Any issues there, we can have an increase of histamine being produced. Then it's like a double whammy, because with that dysbiosis or those overgrown strains of gut bacteria that are contributing to more of a histamine load, then we have that damage to the intestinal barrier. So we can't adequately produce enough DAO enzyme. So it's like we're overproducing it and then we can't clear it enough either. So it's not really one or the other. A lot of people say that histamine intolerance is you can't clear it efficiently. It's like both of these things, right? You're overproducing it and then you can't clear it efficiently either. So then that bucket starts to overflow and we start to get a lot of those really fun symptoms and pain points. Yeah. So that's the second like major mechanism through which the gut influences our histamine overload issues and our histamine levels. Then we have the third point that I wanted to make with you guys today is nutrient deficiencies. So whenever we have different gut imbalances, whether that's a Helicobacter pylori infection, whether that is overgrowth in the small intestine or a fungal overgrowth in the small intestine, or if we have gut dysbiosis in the large intestine, an overgrowth of these like more opportunistic dysbiotic gut bugs, whenever any of that is present, and or if we have digestive capacity issues, meaning we're not producing adequate stomach acid, we're not producing adequate bile, we're not producing adequate pancreatic enzymes, all of these things are connected. This is how you essentially break down the food that you're eating. Any issue with your gut, right? Any issue with improper digestion and or gut microbiome imbalances is going to contribute to nutrient deficiencies, because you can't absorb the nutrients from the food that you're eating very well. Of course, your diet plays a role in this too. If you're not eating enough of these nutrients, you're going to end up with a deficiency. But it gets a little confusing for people sometimes, because you can be eating a super healthy diet and you're like trying to take these supplements to add on and you're trying to eat all these healthy foods, but you're not properly absorbing anything, the nutrients from the food that you are eating, which can then lead to nutrient deficiencies. So if you have these nonstop digestive issues, then you very likely have an issue actually absorbing the nutrients from the food that you eat properly, right? So for example here, just so you guys can better understand, if you have a Helicobacter pylori infection or an H. pylori infection, we see a lot of this with our clients. It sounds kind of like fancy and funky and you're like, oh no, that's not me. We see it a ton. So could be, I think it's 55% of the population has it, but I would have to double check that. So if you have something like this, a gut infection, then that's going to damage the parietal cells that actually produce stomach acid. So you'll naturally produce less stomach acid. H. pylori is also a mast cell liberator. So that's going to trigger more of that histamine release in the first place. But then the double whammy here is that you won't produce adequate stomach acid. Without adequate stomach acid, that's going to negatively impact bile flow, and it's going to negatively impact pancreatic enzyme secretion. And then with that comes improper nutrient absorption. So we can see how it's never just one thing. And I like to emphasize this because some people will be like, oh my gosh, it's low stomach acid, or oh my gosh, it's candida. You guys, all of these things kind of come together, which is also why if you've tried antimicrobials on your own, or you've tried taking enzymes on your own, or whatever it might be, like we're missing the mark when we're not taking a very thorough approach, because these things start to come together. They exist together. It's not one thing happens over here and then the rest of the gut isn't impacted. Like low stomach acid will impact everything down the chain. So this is where we see a lot of other practitioners kind of falling short. And we'll see this in clients when they come to work with us and they've worked with many people in the past. Like they just weren't given a thorough enough approach. Like there's more to the story. It doesn't just happen in a silo, right? One infection will then impact stomach acid, which will then impact bile and enzymes, which will then impact maldigestion, then impact bacteria, then impact gut lining. So it's all of these things that need to be addressed, which hopefully doesn't feel overwhelming to you, but more so feels like, oh, okay, I didn't work on all that. So that's cool, because then there's more for me to work on and then I should get feeling a lot better. So back to the nutrient deficiencies piece here. When you have these nonstop digestive issues, we're going to run into issues absorbing our nutrients. Now, nutrients like B6, copper, vitamin C, magnesium, B12 are all essential for histamine clearance. So if we have a gut issue and we're not absorbing these things efficiently, B12, tons of people are low on B12 due to gut issues. Low stomach acid will contribute to this. Then we're not going to have the raw materials that we need to actually clear histamine efficiently. So the gut, the way that the gut plays a role in this is like it can lead to nutrient deficiencies, which can then lead to issues actually clearing histamine efficiently. What's also interesting is that some of these specific nutrients like vitamin C and B6 and magnesium are all really important for progesterone production. And progesterone can actually act as a mast cell like stabilizer. It can help support like healthy functioning of your mast cells, whereas estrogen plays like an opposite role here. So that's what I'll get into next. But just to recap for you guys, number one is these gut microbiome imbalances literally causing that bucket to overflow. Number two is that gut lining not allowing the bucket to go down. This is a good example for you guys. I'm coming up with it as I go. It's not allowing that water or that histamine to drain from the bucket. So then the bucket starts to overflow. Then we have those nutrient deficiencies. Malabsorption contributes to nutrient deficiencies. Then your body doesn't have the raw materials that it needs to actually efficiently clear histamine. So those are the main three ways. The next piece that I wanted to mention here is the estrogen component. So I feel like this is really having a moment. So let me break it down for you guys. Estrogen and histamine kind of play this dance. They do this dance with each other. When estrogen rises, histamine rises. So that is why a lot of women will experience more ovulation pain when they have a histamine issue or they have estrogen, they lean more estrogen dominant, because around ovulation, that midpoint of your cycle, that's when estrogen goes up, it increases higher before it drops down. And when that estrogen rises, that histamine is going to rise as well. Now, if you've listened to my podcast, you know that I have a whole episode on how the gut plays a massive role in estrogen clearance as well. So phase 3 of estrogen detoxification occurs in the gut itself. We have something called the estrobolome, which is the word estrogen and then the word microbiome put together. And the estrobolome is really responsible for clearing estrogen via the gut. Let me clear this up for you guys. Estrogen, the word microbiome put together, you have estrobolome. This is the community of gut bacteria in the gut that are responsible for clearing estrogen. Now, when we run testing on clients, we will get insight into their gut bacteria. We'll also get insight into a marker called beta-glucuronidase. And beta-glucuronidase is an enzyme that's responsible for putting estrogen back into circulation. Now, if this enzyme is elevated, we can see that you may lean more estrogen dominant or have more of those like signs of estrogen dominance, which would be painful periods, clotty periods, breast tenderness, fibroids, right? It's not fun. It's definitely not fun. Then as estrogen increases, that can also cause an issue with bile, liver, and gallbladder health too. So it's all connected, because then you won't be able to digest those foods efficiently. You need bile to break down fats and absorb fat-soluble nutrients. So we can see how it's never one thing, right? One of these issues will kind of contribute to this not working very well, that then causes this issue. So when you're working with someone, you really need someone to be looking at this like full spectrum. Like we need to really widen the lens and get to the bottom of why this is happening and work to support your body. I like to say like support your body's underlying physiology so it knows what to do and kind of comes in and like rebalances or repairs these many different things that are off balance as a result of the gut being a little off. Maybe that's the gut bacteria or the gut lining. So basically with the estrogen piece, once again, where the gut plays a massive role is we can have estrogen dominance due to a gut issue. So we'll see a lot of imbalances in the estrobolome with people that have like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or gut dysbiosis. Their gut, it can't clear this estrogen efficiently. So then that's going to contribute to more estrogen, which is then going to push up histamine levels. So your gut plays a massive, massive role when it comes to histamine clearance, the ability to clear histamine efficiently, and the histamine levels that you're just basically being exposed to on a daily basis. So estrogen basically can trigger that histamine to be released, which is why, once again, women will feel worse at ovulation. And then sometimes they'll also feel worse like right before the period hits. So if you have like a really rough luteal phase, that last chunk of your cycle, we can tell that something else is going on there. As I mentioned previously too, progesterone kind of helps to stabilize the mast cells. So when you start to lean more estrogen dominant, then you'll have less progesterone around, and progesterone is actually helpful when it comes to histamine issues because it can help stabilize those mast cells that actually produce the histamine. So it's all connected. Good thing is you're in the right place. If you're struggling with any of this, we're super familiar with all of this, so we can help you if you're looking for help there. Okay, So those were kind of all the main ways in which the gut plays, a massive role in histamine and in histamine issues. And then I just wanted to note for you guys as well that the liver plays a pretty big role here too. Now, the liver is not part of the gut, but I consider it like a digestive organ. Like your liver plays a big role in digestion. And when we work with clients, we always help them with liver function, optimizing liver function, making sure they're getting adequate nutrients that are needed for liver detoxification. Liver detoxification is a nutrient dependent process. So it requires loads of nutrients to actually work properly. And then a lot of people are just kind of like, they're overloaded and they have some sluggish, phase 2 liver detox issues going on. So the liver plays a massive role when it comes to histamine clearance. So if your liver is not working optimally, in the case, sometimes it's fatty liver disease, that would be more severe, but sometimes your labs look normal, but things just aren't working so well. I would call that like poor function. Maybe your ALT and your AST looks normal, but you're having trouble digesting fats and you're leaning more estrogen dominant. This would be more of like a poor function issue. If liver function is not optimal, then your ability to metabolize histamine can decrease, leading to more of those histamine overload pain points there. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And that's really because there's an enzyme called HNMT, or histamine N-methyltransferase. Say that 5 times fast. And that's really active inside cells in the liver specifically. So any issue with like inadequate liver function can then contribute to issues with that enzyme being able to properly support histamine degradation. So that's kind of how that works too. So those HNMT enzymes really help to degrade excess histamine, and that's really occurring in the liver primarily. And then we have that DAO enzyme that's really helping to break down and degrade histamine in the gut primarily. So yeah, that's really how all of that works. So when it comes to this histamine overload picture, the real solution here lies in addressing these deeper root causes of the histamine issue in the first place. So to recap those, different gut imbalances, dysbiosis, small intestinal bacterial issues, fungal overgrowth, infections, all of these are going to contribute to an increase in histamine being produced. Then we have that degradation of the gut lining, or quote unquote leaky gut, which never happens alone. It's the result of something else. So leaky gut protocols are not going to fix it. They're very lazy. They're not addressing the root of the issue. But that gut barrier plays a massive role in producing that DAO enzyme that allows you to actually clear histamine and degrade it efficiently. And then we have suboptimal liver function. That addressing that can really help with histamine issues. These are all the deeper root causes, right? We have estrogen dominance, which the liver and the gut play a massive role in that. Basically, liver issues and or gut issues will contribute to that estrogen dominance. And then we have those nutrient deficiencies as well. So copper, B6, B12, vitamin C, all of these are needed for DAO production. This is the enzyme that actually clears histamine in the gut. And then the other thing that I'd like to mention here is just mold exposure and mold toxicity. We see a lot of that in our clients, and that can be that underlying root cause of histamine issues as well. That will impact the gut and it will impact the liver. And then it kind of is a never-ending circle and spiral of chronic histamine issues. So it's not directly the gut. And so I didn't bring it up like in a big way in this conversation, but it does definitely impact our histamine and can contribute to histamine overload. So we want to repair the gut at the root cause level to help the body actually stop overproducing histamine if that's playing a role, and or be able to degrade and break down histamine efficiently. So that's what you guys need to know. Okay, I'll see you next week. Big hugs to each and every one of you. Hope this was so helpful. Bye, you guys. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Nutrient Dense podcast. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, share with a friend, and come back next week for a new episode. See you then.